The courtroom doors slammed shut behind her, sending a heavy echo across the marble floor. All eyes were on her as she walked in, the weight of every gaze pressing down like a 1,000-pound stone. The sound of her heels clicking against the floor was the only thing anyone could hear until the door to the courtroom opened again. Vivian walked in slowly, holding a newborn in her arms. She didn't make eye contact with anyone. She didn't have to. The weight of the moment was enough to crush anyone in her path. At the sight of the tiny baby wrapped in the softest blanket, every whisper in the courtroom stopped. Minjun Park, the Korean billionaire CEO, stood at the front of the room with a perfectly tailored suit. His usual stoic expression faltered for a second as his eyes darted from the baby in her arms to the calm, emotionless face of his wife. The same wife he had spent years neglecting, years turning away from. The same wife who had given him everything she had, only to be betrayed. "Vivian," Minjun said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What is this?" Vivian didn't respond. She didn't have to. The baby in her arms was the answer to everything. The child that had been kept a secret for months. The child that would change everything. I didn't know," Minjun stammered, his eyes locked on the baby. "What are you trying to do to me, Vivian?" The lawyer sitting beside him shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The murmurs around the room started, like a whirlwind of whispers that spread like wildfire. No one knew what to say, but they all knew this was the moment everything had been building to. Vivian stepped forward, walking with a quiet confidence that betrayed the turmoil that must have been surging beneath the surface. Minjun's mind raced. He did the math as anyone in his position would. Vivian had been gone for 6 months. They had been divorced for over a month. And yet this baby, his baby, was sitting in front of him, the evidence of everything he had lost. The child that she had kept hidden from him, the one thing he never thought would happen. "You're telling me that this is mine?" His voice cracked with disbelief. Vivian finally looked up at him, her expression cold, unwavering. "Yes. This is your child, Minjun." A sharp silence enveloped the room. No one dared to speak. The tension was thick, suffocating. This was the moment of reckoning. Minjun turned to his lawyer, who was just as speechless as the rest of the room. "I didn't know," he whispered again, this time more to himself than to anyone else. The realization hit him like a freight train. The child he thought he could ignore. The child who is now a living, breathing consequence of his mistakes. He had spent years building his empire, chasing power, wealth, and status. He'd convinced himself that he didn't need love, that he didn't need affection. He had everything he wanted except the one thing that had always been right in front of him, his wife's love, and now his son. Minjun turned to face Vivian again, his gaze intense. "Why didn't you tell me?" Vivian took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I didn't tell you because I knew what you'd do with the information. You don't care about me, Minjun. You never did. You never cared about our marriage. And you sure as hell didn't care about our child." The words cut through the air like a knife. Every word she spoke was an accusation, a verdict. She was holding nothing back, and her voice held the kind of power that only comes with years of betrayal, regret, and pain. The baby in her arms stirred, its small hand curling around her finger. Minjun's eyes softened for a moment. His cold, calculating demeanor flickered just for a second. He wasn't used to seeing his people so vulnerable, so human. The realization that this was his fault, that the baby in her arms was the physical representation of everything he had failed to protect, washed over him like a wave. The courtroom was silent again, except for the soft cry of the baby. Vivian's hand instinctively reached to calm him. The lawyer for Vivian stood up, drawing the attention of the room. "Your Honor," he said, his voice filled with authority. "My client, Vivian, is here to make sure that her son has a chance. A chance to grow up without the toxic influence of a man who destroyed everything good in her life. We're not here for revenge. We're here for the future of her son, and for the future of what is right." Minjun's lawyer stood up in response, trying to salvage what little ground they had left. "Your Honor, we demand a paternity test. We need to confirm the legitimacy of this claim." Vivian looked at Minjun with a look of utter disdain. You need a test? She asked, her voice dripping with bitterness. It's your child. You know it. I know it. But you want a test, Minjun?
Fine.
Let's do it your way.
Her words hit him like a slap.
He didn't know what was worse, the fact that she had been hiding the truth from him, or that he had wasted so much time believing in his own lies. The judge called for a recess, and everyone filed out of the courtroom in silence. As the door closed behind them, Minjun's lawyer whispered, You have no idea what you've just walked into. Minjun stood there, staring at the empty space where his wife and child had just been. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts of anger, shame, and an unsettling realization that he couldn't escape from. The child was his, and the stakes had just been raised. As Vivian walked out of the courtroom, the weight of the situation was pressing down on her shoulders. She knew that things were about to get even harder, but she had made a choice. She had been silent for so long, letting everything happen to her. Now, she had control of her narrative. She wasn't just a victim anymore. Minjun Park, the Korean billionaire CEO who thought he could control everything, was about to realize he had no power here. The game had just begun. Stay tuned for what happens next. Will Minjun accept his role as a father, or will he try to run from the responsibility? Will Vivian's fight for her son tear apart the billionaire CEO's empire? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more intense twists and turns. Minjun sat in his luxurious office, the weight of the events still fresh on his mind. The silence in the room was deafening, the only sound being the rhythmic tapping of his fingers on the desk. His thoughts were chaotic, each one fighting for dominance, each one pulling him in different directions. The one thing he couldn't stop thinking about was the baby. He had known this day was coming. He had known that Vivian would eventually find a way to make him face what he had been avoiding for so long. But nothing could have prepared him for the moment when she walked into the courtroom, holding their child. The sight of the baby had shaken him in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. It wasn't just the physical resemblance to him, the same sharp features, the same dark eyes. It was the weight of what the child represented. A consequence of his actions, his mistakes. A living reminder of everything he had failed to protect. He ran a hand through his hair and leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the sprawling city below. His empire. His success. It all felt so hollow now. What did it mean if he didn't have his family? What did it mean if his son grew up without him? His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from his lawyer. He opened it, his heart sinking as he read the words. Vivian has requested full custody. She's prepared for a battle, Minjun. She won't back down. The words burned in his mind. She was serious. She wasn't just going to let him waltz in and take control of everything. She had a plan, and that plan involved him losing everything. He gripped the phone tightly, feeling the anger rise within him.
How dare she?
How dare she take the one thing he cared about and use it against him? But deep down, a small part of him knew she was right. He had failed her. He had taken her for granted, dismissed her feelings, and treated her like a possession. He had forgotten what it meant to be a husband, to be a partner. But now he was going to make it right. He had to. Vivian was sitting in her small apartment, the walls closing in around her. The baby, Jiho, was asleep in his crib, his small chest rising and falling with each breath. Vivian watched him for a long time, her heart aching with a love so fierce, so consuming, that it almost hurt. This was her world now. Jiho was her world. And she wasn't going to let anything or anyone take that away from her. The events of the past week had been a whirlwind. The press conference, the paternity test, the lawyers, everything had happened so quickly, and she had barely had time to process it all. She had made a decision, and there was no turning back now. But as she sat there, alone in the quiet apartment, she couldn't help but wonder if she was doing the right thing. Was it enough to fight for Jiho's future? Was it enough to protect him from a world that had already shown its cruelty? She heard a knock at the door, and her heart skipped a beat. She knew who it was before she even opened the door. Minjun stood there, looking tired but determined. He was wearing a simple black shirt and jeans, his usual sharp suit replaced with something more casual, more vulnerable. His eyes were tired, but there was something in them, something that made her hesitate. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice low but steady. Vivian didn't respond immediately. She wasn't sure what to say. She wasn't sure if she could even look at him without feeling the overwhelming pain of everything they had lost. "I know I've made mistakes," Minjun continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "But I'm trying. I want to be a father to Jiho.
I want to do this right.
Please, just give me a chance." Vivian stood there, torn. She could feel the pull of the past, the anger, the hurt, but she also felt something else. A small flicker of hope. Could he really change? Could he really be the man he promised to be? "I don't know if I can trust you again, Minjun," she said quietly. "You've hurt me more than you'll ever understand. And now you want to be a father? After everything?" "I know," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I know I don't deserve your trust. But I swear to you, Vivian, I will do whatever it takes. I'm not the man I was before. I'm not just some CEO who cares about his business and his image. I care about Jiho. I care about you." Vivian felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But the wounds ran deep. The betrayal was still fresh. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Minjun said, his voice full of emotion. "I'm asking for a chance. To prove that I can be the man you need me to be. For Jiho. For both of you." Vivian took a deep breath, her heart racing. She had to make a decision. She had to decide if she could trust him again, if she could allow him back into her life, even after everything that had happened. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can." Minjun took a step forward, his hand reaching out to her. "Please. I'm asking you for a chance. For Jiho." For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Vivian looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Vulnerability. Sincerity. Maybe even regret. She closed her eyes for a moment, her thoughts swirling. Then finally she spoke. "Okay," she said softly. "You can see him. You can spend time with Jiho. But you have to prove to me that you're really different. That this isn't just about saving face or getting back at me. It's about him." Minjun nodded, relief flooding through his face. "I will. I promise." Vivian stepped aside, letting him in. But as he entered, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. That the real test was just beginning. Stay tuned for what happens next. Will Minjun prove himself as a father, or will his past mistakes continue to haunt him? Will Vivian be able to trust him again, or will their fragile bond crumble under the weight of their past? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and let us know what you think will happen next. Minjun stood by the window, looking out at the city. The skyline of Seoul stretched out before him, the lights twinkling like stars in the night. He should have felt proud. This was his empire, the result of years of hard work, sacrifice, and ambition. But all he felt was emptiness. The weight of what he had lost, Vivian, Jiho, was heavier than any of his achievements. The door to the apartment clicked open behind him, and he turned, expecting to see Vivian. Instead, it was his mother. "Minjun," she said, her voice sharp as always. "You've made your mess, and now it's time to clean it up. Why aren't you doing anything?" He exhaled slowly, his shoulders tensing. His mother was always like this, demanding, always ready to judge. She had never understood him, never understood the sacrifices he had made for his career, for the family. "I'm doing what I can," he said quietly, his gaze never leaving the city below. "I'm trying to make things right," she snorted. "Right? Trying is not enough. You've spent years ignoring your wife, abandoning your son, and now you're trying to play the hero? What makes you think that's enough?" Minjun finally turned to face her. "I'm not asking for your approval. I'm asking for a chance. A chance to do right by them. By Jiho." His mother's expression softened, just slightly. "You think you can just fix it with a few gestures? buying a house, attending some classes, showing up for a few visits? That's not how this works, Minjun. You can't erase years of neglect in a few weeks. He looked down at the floor, his heart heavy. I know, but I have to try. His mother studied him for a moment before she spoke again. What about Sua? You know she's not going to let you go so easily. Minjun clenched his fists. Sua, his former mistress. She had made everything worse. Her lies, her manipulations, her threats, they were all part of the reason things had fallen apart with Vivian. I've already ended things with her, Minjun said through gritted teeth. It's over. She doesn't have any hold over me anymore. His mother's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. She's dangerous, Minjun. You've made a mess of everything, and now she's going to make sure you don't get away with it. Minjun didn't reply. His mother was right. He had made a mess of everything. He had ignored the one person who had always been there for him, the one person who had believed in him, even when he hadn't believed in himself. Vivian. He didn't deserve her. He knew that. But that didn't mean he wasn't going to try. He had to. For Jiho. For the future he was desperate to build. The following week, Minjun sat in his therapist's office, fidgeting nervously in the plush chair. He hadn't wanted to come, but he knew he had to. He had to change, and that meant facing the truth. So, Dr. Han said, setting his notebook aside, his eyes gentle but firm. Tell me, Minjun. Why are you here? Minjun opened his mouth, then closed it again. The words wouldn't come. He didn't know how to explain what had brought him here. He didn't know how to explain the deep, gnawing emptiness he felt when he thought about his son, his wife. I don't know where to start, Minjun admitted, his voice shaky. I've messed up everything. My marriage, my family. I was so focused on building my business, on my career, that I didn't see what was happening around me. I didn't see her. I didn't see Jiho. Dr. Han nodded, his expression understanding. You were neglecting yourself as much as you were neglecting them, Minjun. You've been running from yourself for years. But it's time to face what you've done and take responsibility for it. Minjun took a deep breath. I don't know if I can fix it. I don't know if Vivian will ever forgive me. Dr. Han leaned forward, his eyes locked onto Minjun's. The question isn't whether she'll forgive you. The question is whether you'll forgive yourself. Until you can do that, you won't be able to move forward. You won't be able to build anything real with her or with Jiho. You have to stop running. You have to face your past, and you have to be willing to change. Minjun nodded slowly, the weight of Dr. Han's words sinking in. He had to change. He couldn't keep hiding behind his success, behind his empire. He had to face the person he had become. He had to face the man he had been, and decide who he wanted to be. The next day, Minjun went to Vivian's apartment, his heart racing. He had called ahead, but he wasn't sure how she would react. Would she let him in? Would she even speak to him? He stood at the door, his hand hovering over the doorbell. He had already been here once, but that had been a different time, a different man. He wasn't the same man who had walked away from her all those months ago. He wasn't the same man who had left her to face everything alone. He had changed. He had to believe that. The door opened, and Vivian stood there, her expression unreadable. I need to talk to you, Minjun said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Vivian hesitated for a moment before stepping aside to let him in. She didn't say a word, but her silence spoke volumes. Minjun took a deep breath, gathering his courage. I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us. About Jiho. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. I want to be a father to Jiho. I want to be someone you can trust. Someone you can count on. Vivian didn't respond immediately. She walked over to the kitchen, her back to him. You're asking a lot, Minjun, she said quietly, her voice tight. I'm not ready to forgive you. I don't know if I ever will be. Minjun's heart dropped, but he knew he had to keep going. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I will do whatever it takes to prove that I'm not the man I was. I've learned so much about myself in the past few months. And I want to show you that I can be the man you and Jiho need. Vivian turned around, her eyes tired but searching. And what if I don't need you? What if I don't want you in my life anymore? Minjun swallowed hard. I won't give up on you, Vivian. I'll keep fighting.
For Jiho.
For us. I promise. She looked at him for a long moment, her gaze steady.
Finally, she sighed.
You've already hurt me, Minjun. And I don't know if I can trust you again. But I'll let you try. For Jiho. Minjun nodded, relief flooding through him. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was a start. And that was all he needed. To be continued. What will happen next? Will Minjun be able to prove himself to Vivian and Jiho? Will they ever be able to heal from the past? Don't miss the next chapter. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more.